Wow. Holy shit. This already looks so different.
Китай поехал, пошел в цех, там что за пиздячий? Вообще отлично. Так он уже все выиграет, когда просто будет. Что?
Wow. I can't. Hey guys, it's been a little bit, not very long, like a little over a week since the last video's uploading, but this is the behind the scenes video, obviously. Before I get to the Q&A stuff in the next video, I kind of wanted to go over just some general stuff about like just tier as a whole, like the process of making it, like certain things that happen in each act, maybe some plans that I had that like couldn't come to fruition, or just how I felt about certain acts. I have a lot to say about each act and about each part of tier in general, maybe even about the epilogue itself. So, I don't know, I just figured like after introducing myself, I think it just makes sense to kind of just go over this whole thing. Like, there's so many ways that tier could have went, and even places that tier could have ended earlier than Act 6, so I don't know. I mean, I don't feel like having a big introduction. I guess let's just get right into it. I guess starting with the Prelude, really a lot of tier before it actually started. I mentioned in the previous video that this channel was originally my main, and I had it since 2010. I think obviously, since it was my main and all that, you could probably gauge that maybe I had some old videos on this channel actually before the Sonic Dreams collection thing. I think I started uploading videos in 2013, if I'm not wrong. It was mostly like random ass stuff for, I don't know, like I would record a game or like some random thing. And you know, obviously there was my other attempt at a web series before that, but for the most part, like there was just really random old videos of me as like a 10, 11-year-old, really old stuff. Sadly though, I deleted it actually. I deleted all the videos because I was afraid of people finding out about them, and I was scared even if they were unlisted that there would be a problem, so I think I just deleted them because I thought they were cringe, and also because, I don't know, I was paranoid or something. But I do wish I had those old videos because, like, man, if they were still there, they would have had a lot of meaning to Tears ending and to the memories tape and everything. I was able to salvage a good bit of that time through like a couple old accounts I had and other stuff, but man, I wish I like didn't delete everything. Like if I had to tell myself anything back then, I would tell him don't delete anything. Maybe just make it private or unlisted, but please don't delete all the old stuff. You're gonna need it, or at least you would have needed it, because I figured it out anyway. But it's just like right off the bat, I could tell you like there were some really old videos on there, and that ties into stuff later on that I'll talk about. But yeah, just to start off, like obviously Sonic Dreams Collection, that wasn't the first video I ever made, ever. Maybe it was the first one I actually used a screen recorder for, and not like some iPad to record the screen with. But you know, it's for a while I had those, and then like from the Sonic Dreams collection thing onwards, that's just tier basically up to this point. I think and I think also like about the Prelude, I guess I could go into like the original plans and stuff, because I think something to understand about tier is that like it started initially as genuinely just a game review series. I really didn't plan on doing a web series. I really wanted to just do game reviews for a hot minute. So originally, like, that was the whole plan, and I talked about this in the previous video too, so I'll like abbreviate it a little. But you know, I decided to try doing that, and I really did like, I think I recorded like, I think I did a recording of the Knuckles playthrough if I'm not wrong, but I think I just never got around to it if I'm not mistaken. Like, I think at that point I just got really burnt out on doing it, because it's like I had to do all the voices, and I was scared of like how people would react, and like all the time I had to spend on it. I felt like I could do something better, I guess, and I got burnt out. And I get it's weird, I guess, because the Prelude is a really weird point, because it's aside from this and some of Act 6, it's like, and some of Act 1, I guess, before quitting the reviews, it all really was kind of out of game as well. So it's like interesting to think about that, because for a time there wasn't really any behind the scenes stuff. That was just me that you were looking at, like 12-year-old, 13-year-old me. And I guess over time what happened was I just kind of decided to fade into this character of mine that was kind of just me, but not really. It was more like a metaphorical manifestation of myself, or how I see myself in a way. So in a way, like, I guess the series kind of started how it ended, you know, like just me being myself in a way. And that's kind of like, I guess, just generally like going into this whole process, like, it's kind of important to understand I did not come into this initially with a character in mind. I just kind of wanted to make funny videos about Sonic, and that's it. And I guess that kind of leads us into Act 1, which I do have a lot to say about. Because I think one more thing I could mention before going into it is, if I have to give myself anything about the Prelude, like some credit, is that I used the Sonic Dreams collection thing to my advantage, because I uploaded that video and also the Sammy Classic Sonic fan thing, which did get a lot of, both of those videos did get a lot of views, which I think, like, if you want a quick way to kind of get people's attention, I think it's good to know to kind of get into something that people already are familiar with, and then kind of go into the real thing you want to do eventually. Or at least that's a way to do it. Maybe I'm wrong, but from experience, I feel like that kind of got me at least like that initial like few followers, because people thought, you know, like, oh, this is just some kid talking about games, and then you know, everything else in tier happened. So going into that, I guess that kind of leads us into the actual series now, which is Act 1, and I have a lot to say about that. First off, another thing I mentioned in the previous video, but the reviews were originally going to run alongside the actual web series. I wanted to really do so many reviews aside from Sonic, even like different marathons, different like things to cover, but I just couldn't. I really couldn't. I wasn't feeling it, and especially with how much I tried to put into each video, it just wasn't doing it for me. So, you know, it's like interesting to think that originally the series was going to go on for so much, like the review side of it would have ran for so much longer, like just as long as the web series part of it, which is what it ultimately became. And yeah, like that's like the first thing I should tell you is, like, it was not going to be like this. Like, the web series thing was going to be like a hidden layer to it, because, you know, reviewers had like that whole evil alter ego that that tells you you're gonna play Sonic 06 and you're gonna die, like that kind of fucking thing. So that was like the original idea I had, but then I just kind of ditched it. I don't have much else to say about it. I guess going into the rest of it, one of the other things I wanted to address was like the whole thing with Exodus and the Warden having like minions or like people following them. This was before I got the idea that every character was just me, but I really kind of had this idea in my head like they are leaders of their own realms, and so, you know, there would be other people living in those realms, obviously. Why do you have realms if there's nobody in them? So, that was kind of my idea initially. Like, what, like, would there be, like, a war going on or something? Like, that was kind of my idea, because my initial scope for tier was much bigger than what I could feasibly do, and I didn't realize that back then. I only realized it shortly after, like, oh, I don't have other people that can be actors that I trust for this kind of thing. So that kind of leads me into the next point that I want to mention, which is like why I was the only actor of the series, because it kind of ties into like how tier works in general, because I realized I only trust myself to do all of this. I don't trust anyone else. Why not just kind of be the only actor and just use different voices and different effects for each character? And that's pretty much what happened. You know, Exodus has like the higher pitched voice, the Warden has a lower pitched one kind of with a bit of reverb maybe. Icarus has like the reverse reverb thing that makes him sound like a ghost. For Clockwork, I used like a pulse stretch effect, which like, except like it doesn't stretch it actually, it just makes this really weird echoey kind of noise. And for Azala was just this fucking mess of a like filter that I did, and then Redacted was like the closest to my normal voice. I think I put like a little radio effect on it, but like I tried to also do a conventionally more formal voice like this, you know, something a bit more like straightforward. Like you're trying to be very professional, that kind of voice I wanted to do eventually. And I think I just came to that conclusion because I realized this series is kind of about, you know, me growing up and me, like, about adolescence and everything, so it just kind of makes sense that every character would be just a different form of me in a way, or like a different, or like me through like different lenses, I guess. And that's kind of like it felt like that made the most sense to me, really. And that's why I ended up just deciding, okay, I'm just gonna act as everybody. It's gonna be a lot, but fuck it. and then that's kind of why like I just ditched the whole point of like Exodus and the Warden and the beings having like different people assisting them or whatever, because it's just like it doesn't work. Like it's why I didn't want Tier to do any like collaborations either, because it doesn't make sense. It's specifically meant to be a very isolated kind of lonely web series, so it just doesn't make sense with how the series works. It's within a very internal headspace, and it doesn't make sense. It wouldn't realistically connect with anything outside of that. Like, you know, if we're talking about other people's creations, not my own. So I guess that's something I wanted to explain as well. It's kind of a lot, but like I hope that kind of like explains that weird thing I just kind of decided to omit. Because I'm gonna just tell you, Act 1 is a fucking mess. Like another thing I want to bring up is just how I did not do scripts for Act 1, aside from the reviews. I didn't do scripts for Summer Trip or Inconvenience or... Well, Inconvenience, I had like a vague script, but not really. But generally, I just had really loose ideas. I just kind of rolled with it. And it worked to the benefit, but also not really. It's a bit of a double-edged sword there. You gotta be really careful about it, honestly. But like, the whole point about it is just like... I feel like I kind of wish Act 1 wasn't so chaotic, because there's also the matter of needing to read the Twitter a lot, because that explains some things, and I wish it wasn't like that. but I kind of like understand why like tier is kind of hard to get into because of that, because like imagine trying to get into it with such a rough start. Like I don't blame you. I really don't. So that like if I have to give any thoughts about Act 1, I just wish it wasn't like that. But at the same time, like it was me starting off, so I can't give myself too much crap for it. Going a bit further into Act 1, I guess, about some stuff that would have been done, but I couldn't do. The summer trip arc was going to be much longer. The summer trip arc was going to be a lot longer. But like, you might have seen, like, in the Twitter, like, the title initially said Summer Trip Day 1. I was going to have, like, a daily thing going on where I would just, as I go, just kind of have Exodus and the Warden mess with Tig, basically, during his stay at that house. But then the issue kind of became that I think I got a bit sick, actually, and I also just kind of struggled with ideas, and I really did. I had the scene in my head of like the Warden going into Tig's room, trying to sleep and trying to stab him with scissors, but I just couldn't do it. I feasibly couldn't, and so instead I just resorted to doing like a Twitter thread about it or something, because that was the best I could do. I think I had like either a fever or like eye allergies, because around this time of year is when I get some weird allergies in my eyes and nose, just want me to die. So I think that's what happened, and I just couldn't do anything about it, sadly. Though I definitely wish I could have made it longer, because it would have added more to Tig's character and to like the whole suspense of the situation. So I think that kind of explains why Summer Trip was so kind of just there, like it just happened and there wasn't much to it. I kind of just couldn't do more. Another thing I wanted to bring up was actually logs 1 through 6, because that's a whole dilemma. Like in the final form of tier, you know, as it is, logs 1 through 6 are just the memories tape. Like it is just blatantly a record of certain memories that I decided to keep between 2013 and this year. But it wasn't gonna be like that originally. They were going to be a lot tamer. They were not going to be this crazy, but obviously log 7 starts with Tig and Cryptisis, and then he gets out, and then he decides to start the reviews, and then the Warden takes over, all that business. But I did want logs 1 through 6 to be about him being in Cryptisis and like certain things that would have happened there that would have like fucked with him. And then something about that would have made him lose his memory of those logs, but I really didn't know how to implement that well. Sadly, like, it was really hard to figure out, because it's just like it has to be something extreme. It has to be something really fucked up, because he can't remember these. It has to be really important. So then I kind of thought of the detail at the end of Inconvenience with the memories tape and how Tig couldn't watch it because it made him relapse and all that. And then I think what happened eventually was, and this also kind of ties into how I did logs 1 through 6, like the videos that ended up being for the correspondence. But I think I'll get to that later, but it's a whole topic, because originally there were going to be Tig's logs, but then I decided, no, fuck that. What if they're like someone else's logs, and that's why Tig doesn't remember them when he watches them, because they're not his logs, they're redacted. But then I decided, well, like there has to be something to do with them. I can't just leave that plot point like dead. There has to be a real logs 1 through 6. So I decided, fuck it. Maybe it's just the memories tape. Like maybe seeing them just makes him relapse, because those are the actual first 6 logs. He can't comprehend that information right now. And so I think I just came to that conclusion because everything just only fit into place that way for me. So that's kind of what happened there. But originally they were going to be a lot tamer. But my process was so off the shits, it was really hard to tell, honestly. And yeah, I think the only other two things I want to get into are regarding Icarus and regarding maybe the fourth being, kind of. Because I did have 4 beings in mind since really early in Act 1, I think. Like, I don't know, early 2016. But I don't know if I wanted Icarus to appear when he did, actually. Because Icarus's creation was very self-indulgent in that I was legitimately feeling really shitty in that time because of school and everything, and I decided, okay, well, I don't want to do the reviews. I'm really frustrated at things right now. I kind of feel depressed. What if I just fuck off and make this character that kind of is just someone I made up to help me in a way, to kind of make me quit the reviews and then transition into the web series part of it, kind of. I think subconsciously that's what I ended up doing. So even the fucking thing with Icarus's introduction was very spontaneous. A lot of Act 1 is spontaneous, obviously, but I think it's important to kind of mention that, because it just shows how in the moment the whole act was, for better or worse. Like, it's just to show you how I don't know how the fuck I did this thing the way I did. I don't know how I made Tear happen and be finished. I don't know. It fucking amazes me still. But yeah, and the last thing I want to mention about Act 1 finally is there's a funny little Easter egg in Inconvenience. The part where Tig is trapped in like this bubble of cryptisis, like in the other house, that the warden traps Tig there. The music that is used there is the Pearl rapping song, but I fucked it up and I added Paul Stretch to it as well. I think I'm gonna try to edit that in here to show you what I mean. But I just did that at the time because I got into Steven Universe at the time, and I think it's a really funny thing to mention. It kind of shows how fucking spontaneous this whole act was, and I think that embodies it. Just, fuck it. Let's turn this funny meme into ominous ambience. That's the Yevi way. And that's Act 1. Just 5 more acts of this. Act 2. From here, I'm not gonna ramble too much because it's not going into the cornerstone ideas of the series and everything. So I'm just gonna go over generally each point here that I listed. Right off the bat, I guess I could go into Azalo and Redacted, because before Act 2, they did not exist. I literally made up Izalo, or at the time Omitted, because I had joined the TTD and I wanted to do an ARG thing, because I'm like, oh, I know more people now, maybe I can do this. And so I just made up this character on the spot while I was thinking of how to continue Tier after Inconvenience. And it's kind of surprising how I made that character become so important, and same for Redacted. It was in a similar fashion, oh, well, if there's a character like Omitted, maybe there's a character that will save Tig from cryptisis this time, and through the help of the audience as well. So then Redacted was created, and initially Redacted was going to be a much better character, but my dumbass was like, nah, that's a bit too bright for Tier. Fuck him up. But yeah, I guess Izalo and Redacted were also spontaneously created, but I think it was for the better because it added a lot more of a grander dynamic. Because aside from these four beings, there's these two forces that are not even necessarily me literally, they're just personifications of certain forces in life and time, I guess. And I think it was definitely really helpful to create those really powerful characters to kind of like encapsulate everything a little more easily. So there's that. I guess going into a couple other things, and from here also, this is when I start actually writing fucking scripts and like plans, so things aren't as spontaneous, like a little bit, but I was following a general pattern at this point. I guess going into realm names or character names, that's another thing that was a little spontaneous because I kind of just felt like each I for Zulu, Izalo, a couple other ones, I think, mainly those two. I used just like Google Translate for them. I kind of just put different words into different languages, and I was like, well, this sounds like a nice realm name. Although I kind of regret it because I feel like, I don't know, I feel like it was a bit reckless of me. I feel like now I would have given more like straightforward names for the realms and characters, kind of more like titles rather than names per se, because I feel like that would have fit tier a bit more thematically, but I had to kind of work with what I got at the time, so, or rather with what I did at first, so I didn't want to like make things too confusing. But if I did want to change anything, I kind of wish I kind of focused more on making them like titles rather than thinking of a unique name for the realms or whatever, because I don't think that really fits tier ultimately, but it is what it is. As for some of the other names, like the Dark Sea fits, and Cryptisis was I made Cryptisis up on the spot. I don't know what the fuck came into my head, but it sounded menacing and I did that. The house also makes sense. The railway also kind of makes sense because it kind of connects all the other realms of the four beings. So I thought that made sense. And Corrupted Realm, I just thought it made sense. Izalo doesn't give a shit about making his realm a name. It's just his realm. Like, what are you gonna do about it? And I guess that's that. I think that's all in regards to names. I guess that's that for the name origins and all that, because this is when I start really fleshing all of that out. The Inner Greed, also for Redacted, is like the last thing I have to mention. I came up with that pretty late on, as I decided Redacted would be a creation of Izalo as well, because I figured, okay, the Inner Greed as in Redacted and Tig, the Inner Greed, kind of have similarities, but one of them's a bit more controlled and the other was given a lot more power. So I figured, why not make Redacted like a prototype, kind of like Izalo's initial buddy, until like Redacted decided he kind of wanted to fuck off and do his own thing. And I mean, yeah, that's kind of it. I guess if we're talking about names, I hope that kind of explains the process. I think another thing I wanted to go into regarding some trivia or whatever was the Quarters and Fuma. The Cryptisis arc in general, it was supposed to be a lot longer. Like I was going to do a lot more filming for it, but like with Summer Trip, I got sick. I got a fucked up fever. I could barely do anything. Like Answers, the second video from the Warden in that arc was genuinely going to be the Warden and Tig like talking to each other, like on screen maybe or something, or with B-roll footage or whatever. Like I wanted an actual video of that, but I couldn't do it because I was sick. I was fucking sick. I barely felt like doing anything when I was there, sadly, so I couldn't do it. So Answers was me just kind of compensating and making a document that was like a transcript of what would have happened. But Fuma was also going to be longer. I was going to have more footage of like Tig actually, hitting the warden with the pipe and like taking the camera and running as the warden yells and shit. I wasn't actually going to jump off the fucking house, Cardi style. I wasn't gonna fucking do that. Either way, I don't know why I thought of such an extreme plot point. Why did I think of like so many extreme plot points back then, knowing I couldn't actually do them? Or was it? Is there just a thing with that? When you're younger, like you just think of more reckless ideas like that? I don't fucking know. I mean, it makes sense, but that's all. But they were going to be longer, I guess is my point. It wasn't supposed to be so kind of scuffed. I don't think I'm like ashamed of that arc though or anything. I think it's the first point where I started to really make Tyr feel a bit more solid as a web series, so I don't have an issue with that really, with how I did it. I guess that's all in regards to that. The last thing I have to say is actually about the souvenirs, my grandfather's souvenirs and the meaning of that, because I kind of just did that really suddenly. But there is a bit of a idea in my head about how I wanted that to go and why I used those, and I kind of wanted that to tie into the idea that Tyr is a very like reflective, serious, and there's barely any mention of my family in the series at all, actually. And I wanted to make a point out of that with my grandfather's souvenirs, and that he's the only person I mention, and I won't go fully into it because that's personal info, but it is like, I think I did that because I wanted to use something that felt personal to me, as those were the things that Clockwork had, and Clockwork was the first actual peek that the protagonist has at like what's actually going on and why his memories are and why like his own memories are so important to the series and finding the answers. So I figured, why not? What would be more fitting than using souvenirs that I found and that I'm still taking care of and keeping safe. I think it would make sense to have like that kind of connection there in a way. Using those as like a memento and as a kind of a peek into like the fact that you need to embrace your own memories, because what a journal was to somebody like my grandfather might be like a tape to somebody like me, or like someone a bit older than me by like maybe only a decade, So I guess that's the idea I had in mind, was I wanted to do that. Like I wanted to have that kind of thing to hint at the idea that memories are really important in the series, and that like the idea of like kind of finding out who you are and how important maybe family is to that. And it's a very specific kind of thing, and it doesn't relate fully to the core of Tyr, but it is like an important, I felt it was still like worthy enough to kind of give it its own time in the spotlight, I guess, is my point there. And yeah, I mean, I guess that's all I have to say on that. And it's all I have to say about Act 2 in general, because it's a bit more tame there. Like, this is where like I get a lot more straightforward now with my ideas and what I was doing. So, there's that, I guess. Okay, going more into Act 3 now. The first thing I want to talk about is the creation of Cat's Paw Operator. I guess I'll start with the name. I wanted to create a character that basically was just me in a sense, but like was basically an omniscient being that had full control over the story in a way, kinda. So I kind of wanted to think of like different synonyms for like a puppet master or what have you when I looked on different sites, and I saw just this weird term, Cat's Paw Operator, and I'm like, that kind of fits. I have a lot of cats. Why not? So I kind of just decided to do that for the name. But as for what kind of ultimately led to Cat's Paw's creation in general, it was a really spontaneous thing, honestly. Like I wasn't really intending on like actually having a character like that, but I think it was during the production of Act 3. I think there's a bit of a personal factor to it in that it kind of revolved around some of my frustrations, I guess, as a creator maybe, and about like, I guess like just, I had my own frustrations, and Act 3 was supposed to be me projecting those onto something, but even then I wasn't really sure how to express it. So I kind of, I guess, made it this character as like a really subconscious thing, because I was like, well, I want to make a character that's really personal to me, and I want to express these feelings that I have of sorrow and all. And if there's any way that I can't express it already, then I guess this character will suffice. And I decided to kind of make it so this character would be very in the background, but still important. Which is why Act 3 is when they first appear, because that's when things really kind of shift from the whole Act 1 and 2 loop that had been going on before, like in the lore and all that. So I kind of felt that it made sense, I guess. And I guess the whole creation just can be summed up to just spontaneity, like a lot of other things. Is that how you pronounce it? Spontaneity? I don't know. But yeah. There's a lot of other ideas for this Act 2 that have changed, and the ending, for instance, changed a lot. And this leads into another thing I have to go into before that, which is the whole Tig and Eugene twist. Because originally, Tig was the main character, like the only main character, and Eugene was a different name that Tig went by, but the split between them was a lot more metaphorical initially. I wanted the reveal of the real name of Tig to be kind of more of a metaphorical thing, about the idea of like me using a sona rather than just me to express myself in a way. And I wanted Act 3 to be kind of the fact that I have to face that sona can't always fit me forever, and that I have to kind of change that and embrace myself, I guess. And that's kind of what the initial split was like. But then then I kind of decided, well, what if I actually did make it more literal? Well, what if Tig was literally just a whole other character that represented Eugene's more selfish emotions? And so that's kind of what happened. It kind of led to it led to what would become Recluse and all of that then. And yeah, but originally it was going to be a much more metaphorical take on that whole idea of self-identity. And that leads into the whole ending ideas I had, because Act 3 was going to have a much different ending. Like, Reckless wasn't even going to happen initially. When I did my original scripts, because this was the point in the series where I was actually doing like scripts and, you know, plans for the series, and I actually based Act 3 off of the structure of Because the Internet by Childish Gambino. I was really inspired by that album at the time, but originally the ending was going to actually just end with the video The Fall, in that Tig would shoot Icarus, and then I guess in realizing his own the futility in doing that, I was gonna have a scene where he would be looking at a mirror, and then like there would be something that would imply that he broke it, I guess, to kind of imply that he can't recognize himself maybe, or that it's not him anymore, you know, in killing Icarus and all that. It was going to be a much darker ending, honestly, and it would also end with just a simple video just saying like, oh, you know, like, I'm not the insane gamer anymore, I'm Eugene, etc. Kind of like 15 and how that went, but not really. Yeah, originally 15 wasn't even going to happen. I didn't even have that planned until in the middle of Reckless's production, you know, small tidbit behind the scenes. But yeah, originally that was going to be the idea. But then that turned into Recluse when I got the idea for Tig and Eugene being, two different characters altogether. And, also the idea of Izalo having the aesthetic that he had. So when I was working on Recluse, that also went through a lot of changes because initially Recluse was going to be actually different parts, I believe. It kind of was like 5 different parts, maybe like 3 to 5 parts. It was even the way that Recluse would start and how that would progress would be really different. There were some locations I couldn't get, like the Inconvenience House. I wanted to get that, but I couldn't for Recluse, and that kind of upset me because I wanted Recluse to be going over basically past locations in the corrupted realm to kind of give a scope of how fucked up it is. Like, out of all the planned locations, I could only get the resort that Tig ends up going to later. But in essence, like originally, even the way that he was gonna go into the correct realm would be different because really dark. But originally the idea was that I wanted Tig to go to the top of the apartment building and like I wasn't gonna do anything, but like I would like almost drop the phone kind of to make it imply that he was gonna jump, but then he would fall through the tree and then end up in the corrupted realm, like through some weird effect, editing, whatever. But I, ultimately was too anxious to do that, as I was with a lot of other things, and also that's really stupid. But 14-year-old me, okay. But like I couldn't really do that, and so I think eventually I got the idea to make it one large video, I think, because I guess it just kind of worked out that way. I couldn't really figure out how to make it into different parts, so I'm like, you know what? Why not just make it one huge fucking video? Like, just fuck it. Like just completely change it. Just make it one big project and fucking release it that way. And I guess they kind of ended up being that way just because of how everything was going and because of the locations that I couldn't get. And it just kind of turned out that way. And yeah, I mean, I think Act 3 was when I was getting a lot of shit figured out for sure. While, like, I think Act 2 was me getting a lot more of the fundamentals for Tier worked out and, like, making it actually feel like a web series and not like I'm just fucking around and doing whatever. But Act 3 was when I was really beginning to flesh out the characters much, much, much more. Although not in the final form yet, because there's things in Icarus's documents that don't quite line up with how I see it now, because I still wasn't fully sure yet, but Act 3 was when everything was definitely becoming more like, I know what this character represents, I know what this kind of means now. Everything felt a bit more sure to me. And I'm pretty happy with Act 2, but I'm really still happy with Act 3 overall, although I wish I was a bit less edgy in that time, and a bit less, I don't know, I wish I kind of like also didn't make some of the videos as long as I did. I feel like I could have made some of them shorter, and I think pacing's an issue I have in the series in general, which is gonna happen because it's a really huge series and my first actual big project, so that's no surprise, but yeah, that's definitely something I was thinking about. I mean, I guess that's that. The last thing that I could mention for Act 3 is the 2 untitled videos, because originally those 2 were going to be much different. I had 2 old videos from an iPad that I had from 2013, which was me just recording me playing a game, one at day and one at night, I think. Originally those 2 were going to be the untitled videos with the static filter, but I was working on Act 3 on an external hard drive because I had just my laptop at the time. I didn't have a PC until when I was working on 15, pretty much, or when I was done with it, rather. But that hard drive crashed in late 2017. It fucking died on me, and I lost those 2 videos. So I had to kind of make up for that with the 2 that you can see now. Which I think it worked out better, honestly, than the original idea, but it still sucked that I lost those 2 videos, because those were at least like a good capsule of that time for me. That's why I wanted to upload them, because it's just like an echo to what's like actually going on and what the whole thing really is leading up to. But it is what it is. I'm happy at least with what I could do, despite all of that. And I guess that's Act 3. The next is the Intermission, which, I mean, from here, I guess it's a bit more straightforward. First off, I wasn't intending on doing the Fragments ARG for Intermission. That was entirely in the moment. I was legitimately like planning on putting Tier on like a break mode until Game 2 started up on New Year's. But I guess I got kind of bored, and I was like, you know what, fuck it, why not just like do a random Fragments ARG to hint at Act 6, because at this point I was already planning out Acts 4, 5, and 6. I think Act 4 was already planned out, actually, so it was just Acts 5 and 6 kind of that I was planning out and working on. So the Fragments ARG was entirely spontaneous. I think maybe even that was obvious, I don't know, but there's that. Small tidbit there. Another thing I could maybe go over is my original idea for Piece 1 of Game 2, because I think it would be funny to mention. It was going to be a lot more complex, because it was such a reach, but I think my idea was that I wanted to use Sonic 1's debug mode, and that the coordinates of that would help be like a key to solve it, to solve like whatever encoded string there might have been. If I'm not wrong, that's how it went. But it was so complicated and such a reach idea. I'm like, you know what? Nobody's going to get that. Barely anyone's interacting anyway. I'm just gonna do something simpler, like, I don't know, spot the fucking enemy and put the first letter of it or something. And that's just what I ended up with. But originally it was going to be a lot more about using the game itself. And yeah, I think another thing I could go into is actually the ME videos, because originally the ME videos were not going to be connected to Tier, or at least Dreamcatcher specifically wouldn't be, but I think I kind of just did that because I had this obsession with connecting everything with other projects of mine, and I think that I just didn't want the potential of ME to kind of be for nothing. So I noticed, like, oh, some of the ways I do ME are kind of similar to Icarus's character, and Force of Misfortune kind of feels like a good alter ego for Redacted for reasons, and it kind of adds to his character. Even GTI, I felt like, oh, maybe something fucked up happened to them, and they turn into the Warden ultimately, and that kind of led into Gaslight's creation and everything. But I think I decided they would connect to Tier because everything just kind of fit in, because I'm like, well, I mean, like, there had to be some legitimate origin for these characters, and the ME videos seem like a really good, like, maybe prequel of sorts to that story. Like this is how some of them actually came to be and why some of them act the way that they do, and me connecting the two, I guess, just made sense in my head, even if that wasn't the intention at first. But over the course of the intermission, that's what I decided on, and I'm kind of glad I did, honestly. It was a really sudden decision, but it was one that I was confident about. And the last thing I have to mention for the intermission is I had a scrapped idea for log 6, actually. This was before I decided on the correspondence and all that. Because originally, I think what was going to happen was it would be was that logs 1 through 6 would be like maybe from a different timeline or something. I think even that's what the point of the coin was. But basically, I think the original idea for log 6, and I might even have some footage of it, but it was gonna be basically this version of Tig or Eugene or whatever using like this slot machine thing that I had in my room as like a way to teleport to Cryptisis, and then the whole screen and everything would distort, and then they'd end up there. I couldn't really do it feasibly though, and I kind of decided in filming, I'm like, this is kind of dumb. I don't know about this, and so I kind of just changed it, and eventually I actually totally. I think later on, maybe towards the end of the intermission, I decided that it honestly made more sense for these first 6 logs to be a prequel for the correspondence. You know, like it would be a bait and switch. Like they literally aren't Eugene or Tig's logs at all. So I kind of just decided on that because it kind of made more sense to me ultimately. But originally, log 6 was going to be a lot tamer and would like more directly lead into the documents that Tig wrote. But you know, obviously all that kind of worked out on its own, and that's all for the intermission, I guess. Next is the next 3 acts. Act 4. Not much to say about Act 4. The most obvious thing I can mention is Elog 0 was not planned. I think all the clockwork stuff that happened in Intermission and Elog 0, those were not planned. I kind of decided on it as I was just filming random stuff over time. And I think it just kind of turned into a video of its own, honestly, because I'm like, you know, I kind of just want to film shit. And I think it just kind of turned into its own thing as I was like having the emotions I had and the frustrations that I had. So Elog 0, I think, was a good way to kind of tease towards later parts of Act 4 and still kind of be a way to introduce new viewers and also get older viewers to kind of see like, oh, like, there's already shit going on. I think another unscripted part or unplanned part was the Tig Q&A. What was that, like Elog 15? If I'm not wrong. That's what it was. Originally, I think it was going to be a watch camera video where Eugene would actually be teleported to like this kind of other place in the woods, and it would be like kind of evening almost, and the sky would be dark blue. And originally, the whole idea was that it would just be a video of that and him trying to figure that out. But I kind of just felt like that didn't make much sense to do, and it would just kind of feel more like fillers. So I think the Tig Q&A was more like a way to fill that in a more meaningful way, to kind of get people to answer get people to ask questions and get a bit of a peek into what Act 5 had in store, for instance. So that was unscripted, and the only other unscripted thing is the entirety of the second arc, which is Elogs 6 through 10. And the reason why is because of location issues. I thought we were gonna move into a new house, a specific one, and we didn't, and it pissed me off because it made the original Arc 2 idea much harder to do. I couldn't do it, so I just fucking did some VOM ME stuff there instead, and I think it worked to its benefit, honestly. But the original idea was that Elog 6 through 10 would be kind of like how they originally went, but without the VOM stuff, and it would be more, I think there would be like kind of a corrupted realm instance where he would almost end up there. It would be like what happened in Elog 5 with Tig kind of hijacking for a bit, but like I guess like another instance of that, and also just more character building stuff in general. Like it would have been like a pretty calm arc still, but like a bit more, but kind of like amping up a little bit. But I wish I could have done it, but at the same time, like I am happy with the arc 2 that I ended up doing anyway. So I guess I'm not too upset really about that. And the last thing I have to mention for our Act 4, I think, is the correspondence. Because that kind of came to be very spontaneously as well, actually. Because as I was working on Act 5, and there was a whole third of Act 5 that was Izala's logs, basically. I kind of was thinking, like, hey, the 4 beings all have text logs, or like written logs of some kind. Izala's logs are video. Why don't I make Redacted's logs also videos? 25 videos. So I decided, okay, maybe logs 1 through 6 can actually work because that would explain why Tig doesn't remember them, and then the rest would be on a separate channel of some kind called the correspondence, and then Eugene would learn about it eventually, and then see like, oh, like, okay, this makes much more sense now, and all that. And I got the idea in general that it would just be kind of like a different iteration of the loop from Acts 1 and 2, kinda, but it would be like slightly altered, and the characters would be kind of playing into it, either knowing or not really knowing what the actual deal was, that it was actually Redacted they were talking to, and not the normal Eugene. I think the correspondence is something that I'm kind of happy with, but I think that was another issue with some of the videos being way too long for their own good, and I feel like there was a bit too much filler. I feel like I could have made the point a bit more concise with each log, honestly. And that applies to logs 4, 5, and 6, I believe. I feel like I just made them way too fucking long and drawn out, honestly. I think the correspondence like suffers the most from that. Next to Act 3, I really wish I could have like shortened it, but the correspondence was like one of those things I just kind of came up with because I felt like there was something strange about like logs 1 through 6, and I kind of still hadn't fleshed it out yet, so the correspondence was my best way to kind of make that more developed. And that even ties into the Exodus's murderer, who ended up being Redacted, but originally was going to be Izalo, actually. Which is weird. But basically what happened was I felt like Izalo being Exodus's murderer was a bit too obvious. Not that I don't want people to be able to guess Exodus's murderer, it's just I felt like I kind of felt as if well, why would Izalo murder Exodus? Like, why? Like, he wouldn't do it just for fun. Like, if Izalo kills somebody, it's mostly because he wants to actually mess with Redacted. But what did Exodus actually do? You know, like, to piss off Izalo specifically. Because Exodus is rebellion. He's trying to really give answers to Eugene or Tig. Like, there's, like, if anything, it's kind of helping Izalo because Izalo is also trying to give Eugene the more direct answers. Even if they're brutal, they are still answers of some kind. So, and like, who doesn't actually like that idea? Maybe Redacted, because he represents preservation, and he wants his world to be the way it is. So if Exodus tells Eugene all this important information that he found from his logs, you know, that's obviously going to throw a wrench in things, and not in the way that Redacted wants it to. So, you know, gave life the gun and he shoots Exodus. That's that. And I felt like that just kind of made sense, because it makes sense and it's not kind of shoehorned in or anything. It's more like it's more that Exodus just knew too much, and Redacted didn't like that, and that's kind of ultimately what happened. And how that ties into the correspondence is I felt like it would be such a good build-up to have these logs of his that it just comes so out of nowhere almost. Those final few, you know, because you're watching him do all these things, and then suddenly you see him holding the gun shooting Exodus. It's like out of nowhere, but then it makes sense when you think about the whole intent of the situation. And yeah, I mostly especially wanted to do it because of that. Though I wish that I was more concise about most of it in general, but yeah. That's all I have to say there, too. I guess that's it for Act 4 and for the correspondence, because that kind of counts as its own section, but not really. The correspondence, most of the videos on there kind of went as planned. Some of them I kind of did more on the spot, because like I decided like I'm too tired to do this. But that's all, mostly. Like most of the videos kind of went as planned, I guess, is my point. Though the final one was a little bit different than originally planned. It was gonna be just originally a speech from Redacted, but I decided, you know what? I think some words from Cat's Paw Operator after the fact would make a bit more sense, and to kind of wrap it all up. But that's Act 5, which I'm gonna go into now. Actually, the first thing I guess I could go into for Act 5 is I think I could go into like some of the original ideas for the Azala logs, because originally all of them were going to be like camera footage, but one of them turned out to be like kind of like a text thing, and then the other turned out to be an animation. The main reason for that, I think, is because I just kind of got too lazy and too tired of constantly filming shit. I was like, I want to do something to make it feel fresh. So one of them turned out to be like a text thing, and then the other was animation, which 20 is actually one of my favorite videos that I've made, because it's so short, but it gets such a point across. It's so, I don't know, I love doing it, honestly. I want to do more videos like that in general, if I ever make another project like that. But like, I think me kind of changing up the format every now and then was really fun to do. But originally it was going to be just entirely camera footage. Arc 3, the railway stuff, was going to be a bit more big as well. I wanted to have more locations during the filming of it. But there was a pandemic, and it's still happening, and I couldn't really go anywhere. I still kind of can't. So that sucked. I can only go to so many locations, and it made Godforsaken a little bit hard to do as well. But I guess I'm happy with what I ended up being able to do. But originally there was going to be a lot more locations and like other houses I would go to and stuff, and maybe more places in the woods. But I just fucking couldn't do it. It was that or my health. So there's that. I think something that got in the way of Act 5 was also that I was moving out earlier than I thought we would. I was expecting a lot of Act 5 would be still while I was in Brooklyn, in the basement maybe of the apartment, but we moved out much earlier, and it kind of made filming a little bit difficult, but that wasn't the worst thing ever, I guess. I kind of didn't mind that, I guess, because it did ultimately help to have more opportunities to film way outside of the city, and by the time we moved out, I already had all the city footage I needed, pretty much, so I guess it wasn't that big of a deal. I think I should talk also about the production timelines for the acts, because I think Acts 2 and 3 were pretty straightforward. I did those as they were developing. So Act 2 happened in the moment, and Act 3 was mostly over the course of a couple months, and Recluse was also over a couple months after that. But Acts 4, 5, and 6 all kind of, if we're talking behind the scenes, all of that happened simultaneously. I was working on Act 5 before Act 4, and as I was working on Act 5, I was also working on Act 6. So the timeline was really crazy. Act 4's production was mostly in the moment and intentionally so. I wanted to do everything not too far away from its release date, basically, for Act 4 to make it feel very spontaneous, but in a more planned way, I guess, if that makes sense. But Act 5, I had started working on it since like summer 2018. And I think by the time 2020 hit, I only had like Slumlord and Shakedown left to film, and that's it. That was literally it. And I only had the railway stuff to film, which was more in the moment, but not really. But yeah. And then that time, I think by the time I was working on the railway stuff, I was also starting to work on Act 6 filming. But I'll get to that soon enough. A couple other things about Act 5. I kind of wish that I didn't have like no audience interaction, but I don't know what I would have done is the issue. Like I think that's what the issue was. Like I focused so much on Act 5's video specifically. I was like, I didn't really think about the ARG aspect of it, because I'm like, well, what do you do at this point? Because Act 5's gonna happen the way that it will anyway. I don't know what the point of it would be, and I was thinking of puzzles to do to kind of make the wait for Godforsaken not as long, but I couldn't do it. I was feeling way too much like shit at the time for several reasons, but I won't get into that either. I guess that's all. I think one thing that was unplanned was Intermission 3. Sepulchrum, the person that uploaded that video, he wasn't gonna appear in Act 5 at all. Actually, I kind of that was not a character I had planned to appear in Tier. Actually, at least not in Act 5. But I think I added him there because as I was realizing that I was working on these final Act 5 videos, I'm like, oh, well, who's uploading them? Because at this point, the world of Tier kind of has exploded by the time Godforsaken happens. So who's behind it? Because Cat's Paw Operator would be a fitting candidate, but at the same time I kind of wanted an ominous figure of sorts to kind of step into the picture that felt very outside of Tier itself, because that would lead into Act 6 and all that, and how beyond Tier that act is, while also being so close to it at the same time. So Intermission 3 was really unplanned, but I felt like I wanted something to kind of help set the tone for how fucking bonkers the last like leg of Act 5 would be. So I decided to make that video to kind of bridge that gap between the railway arc and Godforsaken. So that kind of just happened. And the last thing that I want to mention, which is kind of big actually, Act 6 as you know it originally did not exist. And originally Act 5 was going to be just fear, and Act 6 was going to be preservation. This did not work out though, because I realized, well, how the fuck do I end the series with preservation? Because that feels weird. Like, something about it didn't feel right to me. So then I was thinking, well, Izalo and Redacted kind of need each other, in a way. Like, what, you can't have life without time, you can't have time without life, necessarily. Or you technically could, but I felt like fear and preservation, I felt like Act 5 being about a clash of sorts would make sense, because that's like the climax of the whole conflict behind like what caused Exodus's murder and everything. So, and I felt like it also, preservation just doesn't feel like a final enough title for an act. I felt like even having no title was more fitting, and that's why Act 6 kind of ended up being the way it is. Because I had an idea, I had the idea since a long time ago, that for like Eugene to kind of go against both of them and to have power over both of them and like make his own decision, but I felt like that was more of an Act 5 thing then, and I felt like I couldn't really flesh out fear or preservation throughout an entire act. I felt like if you were going to learn about one, you may as well learn about both at that time. So I just kind of felt like, why not combine them and then make Act 6 just an aftermath of the climax of that. And then it would be entirely just about Eugene and about the real core of the series, and that is how Act 6 kind of came to be. And I'm really happy about Act 5, I guess. Like, I'm still really happy about it. There are some things I wish I could have done better, but at the same time, location issues, obviously, and my own confidence, and also the pandemic all made it a little bit hard to really execute fully. And I wish that I had really done more, but I kind of couldn't. But I'm happy that I did, like, get to finish Act 5, because it's probably, aside from Act 6, it's the biggest fucking thing I ever did. Like, it took so much fucking commitment, and I'm still really happy about how that turned out ultimately. So it's still surreal that Act 5 actually came to be fully, and I'm still really happy about that. But finally, I guess we're gonna talk about Act 6. I already explained that, like, why it would have been preservation. But I guess I want to explain why it kind of became so much more depressing and so out there than all the other acts. I think it's just that I kind of felt like, well, if every act kind of seeks to resolve a being's arc, you know, like Clockwork, like at the end of Act 1, Exodus is killed. At the end of Act 2, the Warren's in purgatory. Act 3, Icarus is shot. Act 4, Clockwork's memory is embraced and he's not there anymore. And then Act 5, both Azalo and Redacted just fuck off. You're left with nothing. There's nothing to explore other than yourself at that point. So I guess it kind of just became an issue of, aside from Cat's Paw Operator, what is there left here, you know? And I think that I guess that inspired a lot of why a lot of Act 6's, like, aesthetics is just, there's nothing there. Like, it's literally about trying to move on. And in a way, I guess Act 6 is kind of a review on the Insane Reviews as a whole, and on my mental state throughout working on it. I started working on Act 6 for real around the time I finished Act 5. I kind of had, like, a separate script document for Act 6 since July 2020, and I just kind of wrote so much shit for that. And I had filmed a bit before that, of course, like, only if I really needed to, like the apartment footage at the end of The Impossible Reality, or a couple scenes from Emmy, some scenes like that, like, I needed to film at that point, or I just would never get the chance to again, so I had to then. But otherwise, pretty much all of Act 6 was over the course of the past year, if we're talking about filming. And I guess it kind of just turned into this weird act that literally didn't have a title or a specific description other than the symbol, which was, like, infinity and all that. So that kind of, like, was the base of it. I think originally as well, I knew right away, since I started working on Act 6 as it is, that each video would be like would be like this longer video. I thought each one would be like 30 minutes, but I was wrong. Usually I have this thing where I underestimate the length of my videos for this series a lot. Like right now, actually, I'm like an hour and 12 minutes into this fucking recording. Oh god. But like, originally, before I actually had Void uploaded, I didn't have a forward video planned, but instead what would have happened is the first video of Act 6 would have been an update video from Eugene, actually explaining the situation and that he's in this weird void realm that he doesn't know what the fuck it is. But I guess just I felt like that was a bit too weird, because I wanted Act 6 to be very, again, like, just out there, and I felt like Eugene having interaction with the audience didn't really make sense. if he's trying to focus entirely on himself. So I decided what would make more sense is if some of the events in Act 6 already happened shortly after Act 5, but like they weren't released until like months after, like until after Arc 4, which was the End of Greed. So originally it was going to be like just from Eugene letting the audience know that they're okay, but then I decided no, like I think Cat's Paw like actually managing the release of it just kind of makes more sense, because it's going to lead into him. It's going to lead into Eugene and Tig becoming Cat's Paw anyway, so why not? There isn't much I can say about Act 6 because honestly it kind of went as planned. I really wanted Act 6 to be a very isolating kind of act, so I didn't have a lot of location plans aside from Arc 2. I mean, like, I guess Arc 5 as well, but like I didn't really have that much in mind for like locations then, because a lot of Act 6 is just in my house. It's a lot about just talking to the camera and kind of getting my feelings out, and that's so I didn't really expect to like go to like all kind of different places. But yeah, but I mean aside from that, I can't have much to say about like unused concepts for Act 6. I think the only thing is that the Inner Greed was going to be there was going to be more like kind of pixel arty kind of footage, but that was going to be way too much for me, so I kind of compensated by using more camera footage and different perspectives, I guess, and editing that in, which I think it mostly worked, but I feel like the Inner Greed could have been edited a little better, but I kind of like the chaos of that in a way, so I don't know, I don't have an issue with that necessarily. The only thing I really could go into now is Nexus, just kind of how long that took. I guess this is also hinting towards future projects of mine in a way, but originally I did have a plan to make a whole game for Act 6 since like the start, since like I finished Act 3, I think, but the form of that went through many changes, because originally it would have just been a more final hub of like information about all the beings and all that, but I thought, and this is like well after I created some characters of my Sonas, but I decided like that why not make a game that basically goes over all of my projects, so Tier, the ME videos, Lustful Trash, all the miscellaneous stuff I've done, and kind of connect all of that into a nexus, just a weird crossing point that Tier is just a part of. So I guess that was the intention. It would have information and words from all the Sonas about it, and kind of like showing just how much bigger all of this can end up being at the end of the day. And that Tier in a way is just the beginning of it. So I started working on Nexus in September of 2020. Like I got like all the sprite art done pretty quickly. My monitor broke though, my PC monitor, so I had to get a new one in the middle of development, but it was pretty quick, so it wasn't for too long. But aside from that, I think the hardest part of working on Nexus was all the coding maybe, and also getting all the text and rooms done, because I had a bunch of fucking rooms to do, a bunch of numbers to memorize, a lot of bugs to fix. There was originally going to be like an actual working save load feature, but I just didn't know how to make it work, so I kind of have left it just in there to mess around with. Like, I don't know if you wanna. It's a janky game, but it's not even fully a game per se. It's more like to play into Game 3 and all that, and also to hint at future projects in a way. It's not a legitimate like project on its own. So I guess that's why I don't like have like really hard feelings about it, but it is still something I'm proud of, because it took a good bit to make, and I am proud of the information that it has in it. Um, Also, there's a little thing in there that can be found that I don't think anyone's found, but it's something. It's nothing big. I don't know if anyone will find it. I'll probably add some hint about it eventually. I don't fucking know. But yeah. Aside from that, I mean, I guess that's it. I kind of talked about Nexus and all that. I guess there's the final shot of the series, which is the impossible reality. That final shot of me like standing at the balcony and all that. I had that shot in mind specifically since like maybe Act 2, Act 3. I knew I wanted the series to end with that because I wanted it to be like saying no words, nothing. Just after all the noise, it's back to normal, it's back to life. It's back to a new life, basically. And I wanted that to be the intention of it, to be just this kind of moment of peace as the series ends. Maybe a bit bittersweet, but, you know, still like just happy that it happened, you know? So, and I guess that's all really. I don't have much more to say there, actually, about Act 6. I think it's definitely the act of the series that is the closest to Tyr in its ideal form, because every video I put so much work into, and every aspect of it I put a lot of detail into, how everything kind of builds up to this one moment in the final video. I'm really happy with how that kind of turned out ultimately. So, yeah. And I can't really say anything bad about Act 6 other than like minor things I would have changed now, but but it took a lot out of me for sure. I had waited so long to reveal the shit that's revealed in Act 6, and it's such a payoff to just finally have everything there for everybody, and I'm just happy to finally kind of let it rest, you know? And as a whole, if I had to say, like, because there's so much shit to talk about still that I'm leaving out because this video is long enough as it is, but I'm just really happy with it, with Tyr, you know, because it started from such a spontaneous place. I wasn't intending to make a web series. I literally wasn't, but it just kind of happened, and I just kind of rolled with it for years as I was going through school and more personal stuff, and I don't know. I'm just really happy that I got to make it, and I'm happy that I got to finish it finally, because there were so many moments where I could have stopped it. I could have ended it at Act 3, even at Act 5, even at Act 1. After Inconvenience, I could have stopped there. So it's really like surreal, honestly, to see like the full thing is complete. Like this epilogue thing is the only thing I have left to do, and it's over. I can just send it off, whatever. So there's that. Honestly, I'm really happy with Tyr, and I'm really happy with what I made, for sure. And I went through so much shit behind the scenes to get it done, because there were so many location issues that I had, and so many plans that kind of had to be scrapped and changed, either because I got sick or because of outside issues. But I got it to work. I got it to fucking work, and I don't know. It's surreal, but I'm happy about it, I guess. And I guess that's my final thoughts about it. But I already offered that before, you know, so I guess there's not much more to say there. And I guess that also concludes this behind the scenes video. I'm sorry for all the talking, though. I wasn't expecting it to take this long, but I really wanted to kind of talk more about just my process for some bits that I felt like could have been explained more, or like how I kind of felt, I guess, about some decisions and what I could have changed ultimately. But yeah, I'm really happy about it, and I'm really happy about Tyr overall. And it's nice to finally just kind of have a more behind the scenes aspect revealed. Now that's the epilogue, so yeah. I guess that does it for this video. There's not much else I can really say. Next video is the Q&A thing, so I'll see you then, and yeah, I hope it was helpful despite all the rambling, so I hope it was nice to kind of learn all this info, and yeah, see you next time.